Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And as you know, I am on a mission to connect you with some phenomenal people from all over the world. My next guest is coming to us from the United States. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. And it's such a pleasure to be a part of this tribe. My name is Katherine S. O'Donnell, and I am the founder of OP Creative Communications. And that's OP as in two of the words like optimize. And so I'm coming to you from Flagstaff, Arizona in the United States. Now, a little bit about my story is, so when I graduated college, I decided to take off and go to Australia, and I traveled around Australia for a month by myself and really wanted to get a better sense of what I wanted to do. And it was then that I came back and I decided to go on to work in consulting. And so I worked for a consulting agency where some of our big clients were environmental. And then it was really about what I wanted to do after that and what was my passion. And so that's when I decided to get into nonprofit and work for animal welfare organizations. And I did that in San Francisco. So my journey with the nonprofit world really ultimately professionally started there. I decided to start kind of from the bottom where I took on a development assistant role. And so I really learned the ins and outs of what it takes to process donations, to how do you acknowledge people. But my role turned out to be way more than that. It was about planning events like for the Getty family and other high net worth individuals, and planning community-based events and raising money from, sponsors. And so my role really transitioned quite a bit from just a development assistant at the time to so much more. And over the time, I took on additional roles working in nonprofit animal welfare as a director of development and communications. And then I was deciding that, I really love working and helping people too. And so I decided to get into community health care. And that's exactly what I did. I worked for a community health care organization in the Bay Area, and I worked there for 7 years and learned so much about healthcare and about people who are needing services and what it takes and what we all need to do to be able to work together to ensure that people are healthy. And so then after that, I decided to move, and that's when I actually ultimately decided to start my own company called OP Creative Communications. I really wanted to be able to help nonprofits and also small businesses to be able to increase their visibility. And in doing that, it was taking a lot of what I had learned over the years, and it was so that a lot of the nonprofit professionals and entrepreneurs who are starting out, they don't have to keep spinning their wheels to learn how to do this. I've already gone through 20 years of my career learning how to do this. And so it's now my job to be able to both consult and coach nonprofit professionals and starting out businesses and entrepreneurs to help them increase their visibility, because a lot of times they don't know how to increase their visibility, and it means that nobody can find them. And so this was a really big deal for me, and this is exactly why I wanted to do it. I learned when I was in San Francisco exactly what it took to be able to increase the visibility and how to get noticed. And this was before social media, and then as time has gone on, we've incorporated social media into those visibility efforts. But then the key component too for a lot of these nonprofit professionals, for instance, is how do they get funding? Well, a lot of times they get funding from being visible. And so that means that private donors can find them. And grantors, like for instance, I was talking to a client of mine who said that we had produced their annual report for them, and it just so happened that a funder who hadn't given to them in a long time had decided to give them a $10,000 grant because they had produced an annual report. So, those are kind of the fruits of our labor. And we love seeing that and seeing those testimonials and hearing about those success stories. So, to me, that's very validating that this service is really needed. And I'm so glad to be in the right time at the right place, being able to provide the right services to nonprofit professionals and to businesses starting out. And that's where I am currently. So, in a way, that is my journey in terms of my business. A little bit about me personally is that I've traveled many, many places around the world. I've been so fortunate. And when I was 5 years old, I spent 6 months living in Kenya, and it was one of those life changing moments for me where I knew I wanted to get more associated with wildlife and animal welfare organizations, which is what I've done over the years. Um, and then also, I've traveled to Siberia and taken the Trans-Siberian Railway, um, and learned more about where my family comes from, to learning Russian was my first language. And so there's a lot more to me personally. And I have dogs and cats, as you can probably hear in the background, barking away. But yeah, that's currently who I am in a nutshell.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you had been to my part of the world, Catherine. So you've been to
Yes,
Africa, you've been to Australia, you are a
I
very
have.
seasoned traveler.
Yes, I've been so fortunate. And we spent, my dad is a animal behaviorist, and so we spent those 6 months in Kenya while he did his research, and we spent a lot of time out in the fields. And a lot of our friends were wild elephants and hippos and crocodiles. And I can remember a story of my parents saying, don't go by this place called Lake Baringo. And my brother and I, of course, had to go by the lake. And sure enough, we saw a marabou stork, which is about 5 feet tall, land on what looked like a log. And that log opened its mouth and ate it right up. So we could understand at that moment why our parents didn't want us to go down to the
Oh
lake.
my gosh. Now, you view the world from a very intersectional lens. Did your life in Africa, the experiences you've had as you've traveled, influence your decision to go into the nonprofit world?
Absolutely. I saw a lot of hardships in those travels. And I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback here. But a lot of the hardships is exactly why I want to be able to help people and help animals. From all parts of the world, there is a lot of struggle, a lot of suffering, and there are so many nonprofits who are trying to make a difference, and they just don't know how to increase their visibility.
Yes. Yeah. That is the challenge that most nonprofits have. So, over the 20 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, what was the pivotal moment or inspiration that led you to start OP Creative Communications?
I think I was at the point where I couldn't do any more with my career. I had gotten to that point where nothing really was new, and I had formulated so many of the strategic plans for how we were going to implement, say, events, to how were we going to raise money, to um, the various types of work that we were doing, and it got to the point where I just really wanted a new challenge, and this offered me the opportunity to be able to start this company and to be able to help multiple organizations all across different fields.
That is fantastic. So, from your vast experience, what are the biggest challenges that nonprofits face in terms of visibility and funding? And how do you coach them to navigate these challenges?
A lot of times it's the lack of staff resources, and that we completely understand. So, when we're coming up with strategies, we come up with strategies that are based specific for the organization. So, is there a way that we can incorporate board members who can get involved in this strategy and implementation, for instance? How can they volunteer? How is it that we can get more volunteers to be able to participate, say, in marketing? And give some of their time and some of their resources to be able to help organizations become more visible. So those are some components of what we currently do, and it's also about, say, increasing the visibility is really about also getting the word out about your organization, not just through social media, but also through, say, newsletters, or utilizing email campaigns, and some of those things. As we build the strategy, that is helping the organization because they don't have to do that.
That is so true. Yeah, so lack of funding really restricts most nonprofits. And I guess a lot of nonprofits also don't have a good digital footprint, just documenting what you're doing in the community, the outcomes of the work that you are involved in. And in the digital world we're in now, the first place people will look is online to try and find what you're doing and how you're doing it, correct?
Absolutely. They'll look for reviews. They'll look at the 990s. A lot of times, especially more experienced donors will look at 990s, so that, especially in the United States, they want to see, where is their money going to? If they're going to give to this organization, is their money going to programs? Is it going to administration? Is it going to fundraising efforts? And they want to know that their money is actually going to serve exactly what the cause is there for,
Yeah.
versus it going to somebody's salary.
Yeah. So, as a visibility and funding coach, what is one of the most important success stories you've seen where strategic communication played a pivotal role in that nonprofit's growth?
So I'll use, for instance, a youth group organization, and they are based in the Bay Area. And a lot of it is that they just don't have the staff resources to be able to create more communications around what their organization is doing. And so in the beginning, had mentioned that, this is one of the organizations where the executive director just happened to be talking to a grantor, and they had given to the organization in years past. However, they weren't planning to give to this organization. However, they ended up with a little bit more funds than expected. And they said, to this organization, you've produced an annual report. We really like what you're doing. We can see what you're doing, and gave them $10,000. So, that is key component in trying to increase that visibility. Is not only are they incorporating part of that strategy that we've built for the organization, but it's also showing the return on investment from the organization and for the organization.
That's awesome. So, can you shed some light on the relationship building process with officials, donors, sponsors, and other stakeholders in the nonprofit world? How have you cultivated relationships changed the trajectory of some of the organizations that you're involved with?
Yeah, for instance, I'm going to give an example in healthcare, where there was a funder who really wanted to give to a specific program, but that organization didn't have that program set up. So we were able to work as a team internally to be able to create that type of program. So not only was money coming in for the organization, but also it was providing additional services that the organization was not able to have in the first place. And so not only did that funder give just the first year, but then the funder continued to give more and more every single year to that specific program, because they were seeing the results that were coming back to them saying, okay, so we started out the first year, for instance, with about 30 patients, the success stories of those patients receiving this type of medical care. And then we've now increased it to 50 patients, and we're seeing the
Wow.
success stories there. Then we're going to up it to 100 patients, for instance, and we're seeing the
Yes.
success stories there. And that's exactly what the funder wanted. The funder
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that their money was going to something specific to what they really believe in, and they
Yeah.
knew that there was a need for, and they provided that for the organization that ultimately then helped the patient. So it was a real, you know, um, real eye-opening experience of how funding can make a huge difference for nonprofits, but then also for those people that are receiving the programs or the services from those nonprofits.
I like that. So, given your background in advertising, how do you think your educational foundation enriched your approach to strategic marketing for nonprofits, do you think?
Well, I think one of those things is it gave me the foundation for how advertising works, and advertising, marketing, communications, branding. All of that goes into how you build something to ultimately fundraise. So, for instance, when you have a nonprofit organization that you are just starting out, you can't have all these different colors to different fonts, different messaging. You need to have something that is very concrete. It's very understandable for people. It is something that people will understand, and they'll see it and know that that is your organization. That is exactly what you are trying to accomplish, what your values are. Um, and so part of my education helped to build that and put it into practice so that
Yeah.
I could help organizations over the years, not only just create their branding, but really um, set themselves as the brand for that specific cause, and
Yes.
then use that on a consistent and a constant basis that allowed for us to be able to reach donors more and more, especially over the years.
So, brand consistency is everything.
It is, but it's
Yeah.
also coming up with the brand and knowing exactly what you want. And so I think this is a key component is when you're starting out, or even if you need a refresh, you look at the colors. And I always advise clients to look at the psychology of colors, because, you know,
Yes.
you could have a color that you absolutely love,
Love.
but it might not be one of those colors
Yeah.
that people feel good looking at.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
like, for instance, my two colors are royal blue and aqua. And partly because, people know Ocean Pacific. So OP, Ocean Pacific is water
Uh-huh.
and those colors, but then also they're calming colors. So part
Yes.
of my personality has more of a calming type of effect.
Effect.
And so that best represents me. And I will use what represents me in photographs, in advertisements, social media posts. I will use that. And that's the key to really understanding the brand, being happy with your brand, and really utilizing that so people will
Yeah,
will see you.
we can see you. Now, you've published several articles on topics related to nonprofits and animals.
Mhm.
Can you talk about the intersection between those two areas and particularly memorable campaigns or strategies that you've implemented around them?
Yeah, so one of the campaigns, for instance, I've done quite a few different articles over the years, and part of it was to increase the visibility for those organizations. Where my heart is helping animals, but it's also helping people. And so, an example of for instance, an campaign, a strategic campaign was coming up with how do you get urgent care for people to understand what urgent care is when everybody is going to the ER for those related issues. And so this was where I had the ability to work, for instance, like with an advertising agency and come up with campaigns that people would understand. And it meant that it hit different diversities, and it was something that was easy to understand in terms of, okay, so you've severed your finger, you should probably go here. If you have a bad headache, you should probably go here. And giving examples in those advertising campaigns. But all of that really, we were able to utilize, like, for instance, we put them on billboards in high traffic areas. We put them on the subways and in bus advertisements, both on the bus and in bus shelter stations. And so that also went with a social media campaign so that people would be seeing it multiple times, not only if they're out driving their car, they're on the subway, they're on the bus, they're walking around, but also when they're looking at their cell phones. And so, we knew, for instance, there are a lot of patients who couldn't afford medical care, but it was important that they had a cell phone because that's how they
Yes.
communicated with people. So, knowing that, we integrated that strategy into mobile devices, for instance. And,
Yes.
people need to be able to see something at least 7 times before it actually gets
Thank
inserted in, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I've seen that somewhere. Oh, yeah, okay, I might
you.
need that, or I could really use that."
I like that. So, as nonprofits seeks to stand out in an increasingly crowded sector, what are some of the key branding and messaging mistakes that you've seen organizations make? And how do you advise them on a course of correction?
I think one of the key things is when an organization is looking at either branding themselves or rebranding themselves, they first start with a branding guide. It means that they are figuring out what their tone is, what their messaging is, how do they want to be conveyed, what are their colors within their brand, where do they place their logos. And it's just very specific so that somebody within the organization who is implementing, say, a marketing um, campaign, or they're doing social media posts, they can be really constant with and consistent with how they're branding the organization. I would say the next key thing is to, when you're coming up with your messaging about what you want to convey for the organization, it is imperative that both internal and external know those messaging. And I think this is where a lot of organizations kind of fall short on this area of communication, is they get the message out to the public first before getting it out to the staff. And say a client calls up the front desk and says, "Hey, I just heard about this. What's happening at this?" And part of um, when you are branding and your messaging, it's also about customer service and how you are treating those people, because those people are going to remember how they were treated, and they're going to want to remember that they were treated well, and that's when they're going to come back. So externally, if you are sharing this information, be sure to share it internally first. Have staff ask questions, have leadership be able to answer those questions, so that the staff feels good about putting those messages out to the public and can reiterate the same exact information that was put out publicly.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, a lot of times we forget that our staff are a reflection of the communities that we serve, right?
Mm, absolutely.
We have to go inward. So, for nonprofits listening to the Diversity Connector podcast, what's one actionable piece of advice that you could give them to boost their visibility and funding success in today's ever-changing landscape?
So let's say that a lot of people who are listening to this right now have a lack of resources, because so many organizations have a lack of resources, meaning they don't have enough funding to be able to hire a lot of staff to be able to implement things for them. And if they can't implement this, it means that everybody's kind of trying to spin their wheels and try and do everything that they need to on a daily basis, but it's never enough to be able to increase their visibility. So one of the easy ways is to come up with messaging with the leadership and say, we need to get the organization out. And I'm going to use an example about an animal welfare organization. So many times animal welfare organizations, they will have an animal, say like a rescue, will have an animal in their facility, and they're taking amazing care of the animal, but the animal is not getting the visibility to be able to either be fostered, which can ultimately help them get out of the shelter. But then also, it means that that animal is not getting that visibility to be adopted. And that's what we want, as there's so many animals coming through the system in animal welfare that you want to be able to keep the pipeline going, and you want to be able to have people know about this animal and know about the various animals that you have coming through your system, move them out so that new animals can come in. So when staff resources are really limited, you can do something very simple like create those message points with leadership. They could be 3 message points, and then start posting them, and then change out the different animals, for instance, photos with the bios, and making them really light, in terms of the bios. And this could be for anything. It's about, what your programs and services are, and how you're making a difference for the community, and be very specific in your call to action. So when you're putting this out there, have that call to action always end on a call to action. Do you need people to come in and foster animals so that we can get new animals into the pipeline and get them adopted out? Are they animals that need to be adopted? Do you need volunteers? Those are the call to actions that you need to be very specific about, and you can put it out there on social media for $5 a week, for instance, and you're reaching more people, and all it took was just setting up that post.
Oh, I love that. Now, I'm going to end by sharing with you a little 3-minute video that I prepared for a campaign that I am working on right now. And I would love you to give me some feedback, some guidelines on how I can make this particular campaign a reality. Imagine a woman in a village in Africa designing a tribal necklace, selling it for what it's worth to a designer in New York for New York Fashion Week, and then giving an online lecture to students in a university in Paris. That is the Diversity Connector app. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gertrude Mache. I'm a social entrepreneur originally from Zimbabwe and living in New Zealand for the last 21 years. I'm the founder and global curator of the Her Story Circle movement. And this is a multimedia platform where we coach and mentor speakers. We curate their stories into videos, podcasts, magazines, and books. Women in developing countries are at the bottom of the food chain. We're poor not because we're lazy or lack creativity, but because we don't get access to the global marketplace to trade our goods and services and connect. The Diversity Connector is an app that bridges that gap for women in third world countries with those in the first world. It will help them access corporate speaking opportunities and training opportunities as well. Our tagline is inspired ideas ignited and implemented. In phase one, the Diversity Connector is an idea busting tool for thought leaders and a memory practice app for speakers. It has a self-paced speaking course to create your signature speech. You get speaking tips and information. You get appointments and tasks that you can schedule and get reminders an hour before or 15 minutes. You accumulate points by enrolling other members, reading blog articles, watching recommended videos, and meeting appointments with your appointed accountability partner. We already have 30,000 members in 15 countries, and we're based here in Wellington, New Zealand. We want to release our pilot for free to the first 1,000 users. In phase two, the Diversity Connector is now a bridge between our speakers and our women in our community with corporate speaking opportunities and workshop facilitation in diversity, inclusion, and belonging. It will also have a payment gateway via telephone technology for those women in third world countries. Today, I'm here to ask for your help, not just for funding to market and scale this platform, to develop our MVP in phase one, but to extend your networks to help us reach more women, get corporate sponsorship and grants. So please step into the future with me and help us transform the world, one woman at a time, one story at a time. Thank you. So this is a passion project
Mhm.
that I started in 2019 to really empower women in third world countries to get access to the global marketplace. Just looking at that little video, give me some ideas that I could implement as a campaign to bring this to life. My vision was maybe to try and crowdfund, appealing to women in particular who would want to help women in third world countries. I'm just going to throw this at you and see what you could help me with.
Well, let's first off, this is a fabulous video. I really like it because one of the things that you immediately start out with is imagine. And you get people to imagine exactly what it is, and you also point to your necklace. So people can imagine the type of necklace that people are creating in third world countries. And I thought that that was very visually inspiring. And so, and then you also go through your who, what, where, when, why, and how. And I think that that is very important to be able to share that whenever you're doing any type of videos is, who are you raising money for? What is the purpose of raising that money for? Where is it going to be
Yes.
associated? Right.
Mhm.
And, when is that going to happen and why? Why are you trying to do this? So, you just mentioned, for instance, that it's a passion project and why you're doing it
Mhm.
and what the
Mhm.
purpose is to try and get this more accessible to people in third world countries. So
The thing is,
bravo
I
to
was that
you.
woman. I was her, living in Africa, very creative, but living in poverty. So this is why I need to go back and empower my sisters, my aunts.
But I think also just sharing that story, when you're talking
Mhm.
about that video, for instance, I didn't know that was you. And now that I know you, I have a lot more of the connection to the story because I've
Yes.
met you and I've seen the type of success that you've had and what you've had to do to get to where you are today. And it also helps me better understand that you know exactly what those people are facing in that time and
Yeah.
in that location, and that you are the perfect person to be able to help them.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you for that feedback. I really
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Yeah. I would say one other tidbit when anybody is
Mhm.
doing any type of videos, any type of communications, marketing, um, don't just abbreviate, actually say it out, whatever it is. So you had mentioned MVP. Um, and some people might not know that because it might be
Yes,
a business
yes.
term or
Like
and
I was
we see
actually
this a lot.
pitching for like a Shark Tank women in technology thing. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's
So
great.
we
Yeah,
see that a lot in nonprofit or even in business. You
yes.
know, people tend to abbreviate thinking that everybody knows what those abbreviated
Very
letters are.
interesting.
Yeah, right, right. I thought it
Okay.
was a fabulous video. And you can
Mhm.
repurpose that, right? Just like any type of
Yes,
nonprofit, you can create a video that say it's 3 minutes and you can cut it down. You can use it for the platforms that you're using the most. And a lot of
yes,
times, like for instance, organizations will use so many different platforms, and there are uh, different types of apps that help you streamline those. However, it
yes,
just means that then you have to be able to engage with those people who are leaving comments on there, and you have to check it often. And so, just utilizing the platforms that you know your audience is and you can communicate well with them and just focus on those will be really
yes.
helpful and repurposing videos in multiple ways.
Fantastic. Well, Catherine, it is such an honor to have met you. Thank you for the work that you're doing in the social impact world.
Thank you. Thank you
The
for
world
having me.
needs an army of Catherines to get out there and make a difference.
I would love an army of Catherines. I'll take an army of Catherines any day.
I love it. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Diversity Connector is bringing you some phenomenal people from all over the world, sharing ideas, ways to do things smart. Come back again tomorrow when I interview another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Catherine, thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye for now, everybody. And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and definitely